This is Theology Bits, a ministry of Central Lutheran Church, Eugene, Oregon. I'm Pastor Ben. This video is the fourth in our installment of a series on peace, or shalom, from a biblical theological perspective. We've talked about several different items in the fullness of the picture of shalom. And today, I'd like to look at one of the applications of shalom in a biblical theological perspective, which is surrounding eating. And this application will reveal some other aspects of what peace is in the Bible that we may not have picked up elsewhere. So first, eating. Almost all eating in almost all society does have to do with community in general. Shalom is fundamentally about community. And so there's a natural pairing between these two things. Now, in the Bible, there are two big questions when it comes to eating. First is, what can one eat? And the second is, with whom can one or does one eat? Because sometimes you can, but you choose not to. Which again gets back to community. With whom and what do we eat? This video will be far more about with whom do we eat rather than what. So first, understand dining as a religious practice. This dining was not merely a social component, but it had social components. So, for example, with whom do we eat? Well, first, we see throughout the Bible multiple times where eating becomes a breaking point. For example, in the book of Exodus, and actually this is in Genesis, when Joseph is in Genesis, and he's in Egypt as the second in command in Egypt, and he has his brothers come to the palace, and of course they don't know that it's Joseph, that it makes the comment that Egyptians would not eat with Hebrews. It's only one little comment, but it's striking. That eating was too intimate of behavior in order that they could do that together. Of course, later the Egyptians will be enslaving the Hebrews. These are different, and so therefore they don't eat together. In the New Testament, of course, the obvious eating question has to do with the relationships between Jews and Gentiles, and even more carefully, Jews who are followers of Jesus and Gentiles who are followers of Jesus, or Jews who are not followers of Jesus and Gentiles who are, or Gentiles who are not and Jews who are. It's more specific than just Jews and Gentiles, but that question, with whom could you eat? And even the question of with whom could you eat was not necessarily all Jewish people would eat with all Jewish people, that there was some further restrictions based on ritual law, particularly with respect to the Pharisees, who would not eat with all other Jewish people. Language of this is a sin, these are sinners and tax collectors and things. Well, these were Jewish people, but the Pharisees were doing something with that, wherein they looked at the ritual law that all people needed to do before they ate, and they said, well, what about the specific ritual law that the priests followed, which was more than just what everybody did. We want everyone to follow that law in order for us to eat together, which, by the way, we should be fair to them. Their goal of that was to provide an equality to religiosity in Judaism, to say we don't like that some people, these priests, have special rituals for their special role. Instead, everybody should do that, so it creates parity all the way across. So these are the questions. With whom do you eat? Now, to understand why this is so important, we should understand a little bit about dining. So first, to recognize that dining is a political act. And in a culture of honor and shame, and that's not to criticize this culture. Many cultures are honor shame cultures. Dining was everything. That if you had someone coming to your house to eat, they were honoring your house. If you were invited to someone's house, you were honored by their invitation. Simultaneously, if you were deliberately not invited into someone's house, it was you were not someone who was worthy of being welcomed. And so it was very important because social relationships, what we would just call social relationships, or sometimes friends, but social relationships were far more tied to the question of worth in society. Friends were not made because that you could have companionship. Friends were made for the question of worth. And there was a very important relationships, xenos, guest friend relationships, which guest friends were people who, our relationship was so close that if I were to come to your house, you will let me in at any time, ask me no questions, and protect me from anything. No questions asked, even if I were in the wrong. And this was one of the ways in which Roman society was structured. There was no social structures like a fire department or a police force. What you had were friends who would take care of you, and friends who would look after you. Very important. And so social relationships didn't just have a feel-good aspect to worth, but you really did need these things. And it was very political. Who was going to be part of this was important because in dining was the order of society. With whom do you dine, and how does that reflect who we all are together? Even when we dine together, who has the seat of honor? When Jesus uproots us and says, give up the seat of more honor rather than less, he's saying uproot the order of society, do something different. And so dining was a really big deal, and this is just societally. This isn't even really religious yet. This is just saying that in order to eat together, this is what holds your whole society together. This is how you relate with one another at all. This, by the way, is on this question of Jews and Gentiles in Galatians chapter 2, when Paul talks about this with respect to this conflict at Antioch where Cephas, probably Peter, and others from Jerusalem stop eating with Gentiles. What they're doing is they are now no longer interacting with Gentiles at all. This was the social occasion to get together. So if you can't eat, you can't get together. It's not just about a meal, it's about everything that is being in relationship. Then this is the social aspect. Then we have dining as worship. Different color for this. And that when you came together and ate, you were coming together in order to worship together. The table became primarily not an eating space, but a praying space. Not everyone could go to synagogue, but everyone could come to a table. And with whom you worshiped mattered, which, by the way, is why this whole thing for the Pharisees of how you worship together is you are now, how you eat together is how you're worshiping together, and it matters who we worship with. We want to worship with people who believe the same things, who are prepared in the same way. This is a worship service. Now, the message of shalom is to include the outcast, who's seen as less worthy. This is Jesus's language. Give up the seat of honor for those who would not usually reside in it. Because what we're saying is this outcast and the less worthy, you're not doing this out of hospitality. Hospitality is saying, you are less worthy than me, but I'm going to go ahead and let you in anyhow. This is different. This is saying that you are an absolute full member. So frankly, the language of outcast or less worthy is no longer true. You are just as worthy. And that your worth, though, does not come from all of these things, but as being a child of God. It is a new structure of what worth is. Shalom and worth are tied completely directly. And so then all people eat together in order to enact and show that the order of society has been completely abrogated so that you are all in the same space before God, which is why this is eating is an eschatological event. The banquet at the end of days. All people eat before God and with God. And so that now the question of worth, the question of being together in society is enacted cosmically and ultimately in who God is in our lives. This is a transformational aspect of what shalom means. That things are different than they were, and that this is what is new in this new creation. This has been the fourth installment of our exploration of the concept of peace and shalom. More to come. This is Theology Bits. I'm Pastor Ben.